The 60-year-old widow was rejected by every man for being too old, until a broken rancher changed her life. At 60 years old, she carried herself with a sense of dignity and calm that came from living a life full of experiences, both joyful and painful. She had been married for 35 years to her husband, Thomas, who had passed away a decade ago. Their life together had been simple but full of love. They had raised 2 children, who were now grown and busy with their own families and careers. Although Margaret's home was filled with memories of laughter and warmth from the past, the silence she lived with now often reminded her of what she had lost. After Thomas's death, Margaret had settled into a routine. Every morning, she would wake up early, make herself a cup of tea, and spend a few quiet moments looking out at the garden they had tended together. Flowers bloomed in neat, colorful rows, and the small vegetable patch produced fresh vegetables that Margaret would use to cook meals for herself. Gardening had become a form of therapy for her, a way to feel connected to life, growth, and beauty, even when her own heart felt heavy. She would often whisper to the plants as she worked, as if speaking to old friends who understood her more deeply than anyone else at the moment. Margaret's days were largely solitary, but she had friends in the neighborhood who checked in from time to time. She volunteered at the local library and sometimes helped out at the community center, where she would read stories to children or assist in organizing small events. She found joy in helping others, even though she secretly wished for someone to share her own life with. Despite her active involvement in the community, the loneliness of evenings weighed on her. Sitting in the quiet of her home, Margaret sometimes imagined what it would be like to have someone to share a cup of coffee with, someone to laugh with, someone to walk through the garden beside her and reminisce about memories that only they shared. Friends and family encouraged her to try dating again, to meet new people, and to open herself up to love once more. Margaret, however, was hesitant. The thought of rejection frightened her. Over the years, she had come to accept that society often valued youth over experience, and she feared that at 60, she might no longer be seen as desirable. Yet, deep down, she knew that her heart still yearned for companionship. She had loved and been loved, and she knew that life was too short to live in constant solitude. Still, every attempt she had made at dating had ended in disappointment. Men she met seemed friendly at first but would soon drift away, often citing her age as a reason, sometimes without even needing to say it outright. The feeling of being overlooked because of something as natural as aging was a bitter pill to swallow. One sunny afternoon, Margaret decided to take a walk through the small park near her home. The park had always been a place of comfort for her, a place where she could breathe fresh air, watch children play, and observe the simple rhythms of life. As she walked along the gravel path, she noticed couples holding hands, laughing, and sharing small gestures of affection. Margaret felt a pang of longing. She wondered if love was something she could still find or if her chance had quietly passed her by. Shaking her head, she tried to push the thoughts away, focusing instead on the vibrant flowers and the gentle rustle of the trees. Nature had a way of soothing her, reminding her that life continued to grow and flourish, even when people felt stuck in pain or sadness. Margaret's family noticed her quiet sadness and gently encouraged her to open her heart again. Her daughter, Emily, often called her, saying, "Mom, there are so many wonderful people out there who would love to know you. Don't let age stop you from finding happiness." Her son, David, would sometimes tease her lightly, saying, "You're far too amazing to be alone all the time, Mom. You need someone who appreciates all that you are." These words warmed Margaret's heart, yet also made her apprehensive. She wanted to believe them, but past rejections had left scars that made her wary. The thought of venturing into the world of dating again was both exciting and frightening. One evening, as she prepared dinner, Margaret reflected on her life. She thought about Thomas and the years they had shared. The quiet mornings, the family vacations, the celebrations, and even the small disagreements that had seemed important at the time but now seemed trivial. She remembered the joy of holding her children as they grew, guiding them through life, and watching them become the people they were today. And she realized that her story was far from over. Life had not stopped for her, and perhaps there were still chapters yet to be written. She resolved that she would not let fear or societal expectations dictate her happiness any longer. The next day, Margaret decided to try something new. She attended a local senior meetup group that she had been curious about for months. The group met weekly at a small community hall, where members would share stories, participate in games, and discuss hobbies. Margaret felt nervous as she walked through the doors, unsure if she would fit in or if she would simply feel out of place. However, as soon as she entered, she was greeted warmly by several members. Their smiles and friendly words made her heart feel lighter. For the first time in a long while, she felt a glimmer of hope that life could still offer companionship, even if it was just in friendship for now. During the meetup, Margaret met several people her age. They shared stories of their own experiences with love, loss, and loneliness. Some had been widowed like her, while others had gone through divorces or long periods of single life. Hearing their stories made Margaret feel less isolated. She realized that everyone had faced struggles, and that age did not define one's worth or ability to experience joy. She laughed at the humorous anecdotes and nodded in understanding at the tales of heartbreak. The experience was both comforting and empowering. Margaret left the gathering feeling lighter, as if a small weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She began to understand that the first step toward finding love again was to allow herself to be seen and to embrace the possibilities that life still held. Margaret also decided to explore online dating, though she approached it cautiously. She created a profile that highlighted her interests, values, and experiences, carefully choosing words that reflected her personality. She uploaded a few photos of herself smiling in her garden and walking through the park, hoping to convey warmth and authenticity. The first few days brought mixed feelings. She received some messages, but many were brief or impersonal. A few were polite but clearly indicated that age was a concern for the sender. Each response brought a wave of disappointment, but Margaret reminded herself not to be discouraged. She realized that meaningful connections often took time and patience. She was determined to remain hopeful, knowing that genuine companionship could not be rushed. Margaret's days became a balance of old routines and new experiences. She continued tending her garden, volunteering at the library, and spending quiet evenings reflecting on her life. But she also dedicated time to exploring social opportunities and connecting with others. Slowly, she began to notice subtle changes within herself. She felt more confident in expressing her thoughts and feelings, more willing to engage with strangers, and more open to the possibility of love. These small shifts gave her a sense of empowerment. She understood that while rejection could sting, it did not define her value or diminish her worth. Her life had meaning beyond what others thought of her, and she was beginning to embrace that truth fully. One crisp autumn morning, Margaret attended a community fundraiser for local charities. The event was lively, filled with laughter, music, and the aromas of home-cooked food. She wandered among the stalls, admiring the crafts and engaging in conversations with other attendees. It was there that she first noticed Henry, a tall, rugged man with a quiet demeanor, helping to set up one of the charity booths. He seemed absorbed in his work, yet there was a gentleness in his movements that caught Margaret's attention. She felt a flicker of curiosity, though she reminded herself to remain cautious. After years of feeling overlooked, the idea of allowing someone new into her life was both thrilling and nerve-wracking. Margaret found herself drawn to Henry's presence throughout the event. They exchanged brief smiles and polite greetings, and over the course of the afternoon, a casual conversation sparked. They discussed the charity work, shared a few laughs about minor mishaps during setup, and discovered a shared appreciation for community involvement. Margaret felt an unusual ease in talking to him, a sense of being understood without the need for elaborate explanations. For the first time in years, she sensed the possibility of a connection that went beyond friendship, though she reminded herself to take things slowly. Life had taught her patience, and she knew that rushing into anything could be risky. By the end of the event, Margaret returned home with a heart that felt lighter than it had in a long time. She reflected on the day's experiences and realized that even at 60, life could surprise her. She had taken steps toward rediscovering herself, confronting her fears, and opening her heart to new possibilities. Though the path ahead was uncertain, Margaret felt a renewed sense of hope. She understood that love, companionship, and joy were not limited by age. They were available to those who were willing to seek them, nurture them, and embrace the unexpected. As she prepared for bed that night, Margaret thought about the journey she had begun. She realized that while rejection and loneliness had been part of her story, they were not the final chapters. life still held opportunities for connection, understanding, and happiness. She felt a quiet excitement about the days to come, knowing that each step she took, no matter how small, brought her closer to discovering what her heart truly desired. With a deep breath, she closed her eyes, feeling a sense of peace and anticipation. For the first time in a long while, Margaret allowed herself to believe that love could find her again, even in ways she had never imagined. Margaret woke up the next morning with a sense of quiet determination. The previous day's event had left her heart feeling lighter, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a spark of excitement about the future. She knew that if she wanted to move beyond her loneliness, she would need to take small, deliberate steps to open herself up to life again. She began by thinking about what truly made her happy: gardening, volunteering, reading, and perhaps most importantly, connecting with people. Life had taught her that genuine happiness was not found in grand gestures alone, but in the small moments of connection and care. Determined to expand her world, Margaret decided to attend more community events. She signed up for a local art class, curious to explore a hobby she had always admired but never had the time to pursue. On the first day, she entered the classroom with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The room was filled with people of different ages, all eager to learn and create. Margaret felt a little out of place at first, worried that her age would make her seem different from everyone else. Yet, as she looked around, she realized that each person had their own story, their own unique perspective. The instructor, a cheerful woman named Clara, welcomed everyone warmly, encouraging them to express themselves freely through their artwork. Margaret picked up her brush and began to paint. The strokes were tentative at first, but gradually she found a rhythm. With each brushstroke, she felt a sense of release, a way to express feelings she had held inside for years. As she worked, she struck up conversations with a few classmates. One woman shared stories of traveling abroad in her 20s, while a man spoke about his experiences raising grandchildren. Margaret listened with genuine interest, laughing and nodding as they spoke. It was refreshing to engage with people who shared their experiences openly, and who, like her, had faced both joys and hardships in life. She realized that forming new connections did not have to be daunting. It could be as simple as sharing a smile, a story, or a moment of understanding. After the class, Margaret returned home with a renewed sense of purpose. She felt proud of herself for stepping out of her comfort zone and trying something new. That evening, she reflected on her encounters from the day and realized how much she had missed the simple joys of meeting new people and sharing experiences. She also thought about Henry, the man she had met at the charity event. Although their conversation had been brief, she felt a lingering curiosity about him. There was something in his quiet, steady demeanor that had made her feel understood, a sense of comfort she had not felt in years. She found herself wondering about him, not in a way that was rushed or desperate, but in a gentle, thoughtful way that made her heart feel alive. In the following weeks, Margaret continued to explore opportunities to connect with others. She attended book clubs, charity events, and social gatherings organized by the community center. Each outing brought new experiences, small challenges, and moments of joy. Some encounters were awkward, some conversations ended quickly, and some people simply did not click with her. Yet, Margaret learned to take each interaction as a lesson rather than a failure. She realized that meaningful connections could not be forced, and that patience was essential. Each smile she shared, each story she told, and each genuine conversation brought her closer to understanding that companionship was about mutual respect, understanding, and shared values, rather than appearances or age. Margaret also spent more time reflecting on her own desires and boundaries. She thought about the kind of relationship she wanted, the qualities she valued in a partner, and the experiences she hoped to share. She knew that she no longer wanted to chase after approval or validation from others. Instead, she wanted a relationship built on trust, respect, and companionship, something that honored both her past and her future. This clarity gave her confidence. She began to feel that she was not just seeking someone to fill a void, but someone with whom she could build a meaningful and enriching connection. This shift in perspective made her feel stronger and more self-assured. One afternoon, Margaret received an invitation from the community center to participate in a volunteer program supporting a local animal shelter. The program involved spending time with the animals, assisting with feeding and care, and helping organize adoption events. Margaret was immediately drawn to the idea. She had always loved animals, and the thought of contributing to their well-being felt deeply fulfilling. On her first day at the shelter, she was greeted by a friendly staff member who showed her around and introduced her to the various animals. Margaret's heart melted as she met playful puppies, shy kittens, and gentle older dogs. She felt a sense of purpose in caring for them, a feeling that reminded her of the nurturing she had given her family over the years. While volunteering, Margaret began to notice a familiar figure at the shelter, Henry. He was assisting with the repairs of the shelter's fencing and appeared focused on his work, yet there was a gentle calm in his movements. Margaret felt a flutter of curiosity and excitement. She approached him cautiously, offering a friendly greeting. Henry looked up, surprised but pleased, and they began to talk. Their conversation flowed naturally, covering topics from animal care to shared experiences of loss. Margaret found herself drawn to Henry's quiet wisdom and gentle humor. She realized that they shared more than just an interest in volunteering. They both understood grief, resilience, and the value of small joys in life. Their bond began to deepen, not through grand gestures, but through shared understanding and simple companionship. Over the next few weeks, Margaret and Henry spent more time together at the shelter. They would chat while feeding the animals, share coffee during breaks, and occasionally take short walks around the property. Margaret discovered that Henry had been a rancher for most of his life, managing his family's property and livestock. He had faced his own hardships, including the loss of his wife several years ago, which had left him feeling isolated and burdened by responsibilities. Margaret listened with empathy as he recounted his experiences, and in turn, he listened as she shared her own story of loss and resilience. Their conversations were honest, comforting, and filled with mutual respect. They did not rush to define their relationship, but a quiet, meaningful connection began to blossom. Margaret also noticed changes within herself. She felt more energized, more hopeful, and more open to the possibilities of life. Her days were no longer just routines of solitude. They were filled with purpose, connection, and small moments of joy. She laughed more, smiled more, and found herself anticipating her interactions with Henry. She also realized that she was learning to value herself in new ways. She no longer measured her worth by others, perceptions, or societal standards. Instead, she focused on her strengths, her kindness, and her capacity for love and compassion. This self-awareness gave her a sense of freedom and empowerment she had not felt in years. Meanwhile, Margaret continued her efforts in online dating, though now with a new sense of calm and perspective. She was no longer driven by desperation or the need for validation. Instead, she approached interactions with patience and authenticity. Some messages were kind but did not lead to meaningful connections, and others were brief and impersonal. Margaret learned to view each response as a chance to understand herself and her desires better. She realized that her life was already rich with purpose, friendship, and hope, and that any romantic connection would be a complement to, rather than the foundation of, her happiness. This mindset allowed her to engage with potential partners without fear or anxiety, making her interactions more genuine and fulfilling. One sunny morning, Margaret and Henry decided to take a walk near the shelter, exploring a nearby nature trail. The trail wound through a small forest, with sunlight streaming through the leaves and birds singing overhead. As they walked, they talked about their favorite books, childhood memories, and dreams for the future. Margaret felt a sense of peace she had not experienced in years. She realized that while life had been difficult and full of loss, it had also prepared her for this moment, a moment of connection, understanding, and quiet happiness. Henry, too, seemed lighter, more at ease, and more willing to open his heart to the possibility of companionship. Their bond grew stronger with each shared experience, built on trust, mutual respect, and the joy of simply being together. Margaret began to notice that her heart was slowly opening in ways she had not anticipated. She felt a sense of excitement about the future, tempered by patience and thoughtfulness. She realized that meaningful relationships were not about rushing or forcing connections. They were about shared experiences, empathy, and a willingness to understand and support one another. This realization brought her a sense of clarity and calm. She understood that her life was still full of possibilities and that she had the power to shape her own happiness. She felt grateful for the small moments, the shared laughter, and the gentle companionship that was slowly becoming a part of her life. By the end of part 2, Margaret had taken significant steps toward embracing life again. She had opened her heart to new experiences, formed meaningful connections through volunteering and social events, and begun to explore the possibility of love once more. Her encounters with Henry, in particular, had sparked a quiet hope within her, a reminder that companionship and joy could be found even in the later stages of life. Margaret felt a renewed sense of purpose, confidence, and excitement about the days to come. She knew that the journey ahead would require patience, understanding, and openness, but she was ready to embrace it fully, one step at a time. Margaret had grown more comfortable in her daily routine, but now there was a new warmth in her life that she had not expected. Her friendship with Henry, the quiet rancher she had met at the animal shelter, had slowly deepened into something that went beyond casual conversation. They spent more time together, learning about each other's lives, sharing small moments of joy, and slowly uncovering the layers of their pasts. Margaret found that talking with Henry was different from any interaction she had experienced in years. There was a sense of understanding, an unspoken empathy that made her feel safe and seen. For the first time in a long while, she began to imagine the possibility of companionship again, not in a distant, abstract way, but as something tangible and real. Henry, too, had begun to look forward to their encounters. He had lived alone for years after losing his wife, finding comfort in the solitude of his ranch and the routine of caring for his land and animals. While the work gave him purpose, it had not filled the emptiness he felt in his heart. Meeting Margaret had been unexpected, yet her presence brought a gentle light into his life. Her kindness, her warmth, and her willingness to listen without judgment reminded him of what he had lost and what he still hoped to find. Though cautious, he began to feel a quiet hope stirring within him, a reminder that life could still offer moments of happiness even after deep loss. One afternoon, Margaret visited Henry at his ranch for the first time. She had been curious about the life he led and had wanted to understand more about the man behind the quiet demeanor. As she arrived, she noticed the sprawling land, the neat fences, and the rhythm of a life built around hard work and responsibility. The ranch had a rustic charm, with wide open fields, grazing animals, and the distant mountains providing a serene backdrop. Henry greeted her warmly, his usual reserved manner softened by the genuine smile he offered. Margaret felt a mix of excitement and nervousness, unsure how to navigate this new aspect of their relationship. Yet, as she stepped onto the ranch, she felt a sense of ease, as if she were exactly where she was meant to be. Henry showed Margaret around the property, pointing out the different areas of the ranch, explaining the care each part required, and sharing stories of the animals he had raised over the years. Margaret listened intently, asking questions and offering observations. She found herself fascinated by the complexity and dedication involved in running a ranch, and she admired Henry's resilience and commitment. As they walked through the fields, Margaret noticed the care with which Henry handled the animals, his patience and attentiveness reflecting the depth of his character. She realized that, like her, he had endured loss and hardship, and yet he continued to nurture and protect life around him. This understanding deepened her respect and admiration for him, and she felt a growing connection that went beyond surface-level companionship. They spent the afternoon working together, performing small tasks around the ranch. Margaret helped repair a fence, feed some of the animals, and even tried her hand at milking a cow under Henry's guidance. Laughter filled the air as they stumbled through unfamiliar tasks, learning from each other and enjoying the simple pleasures of shared effort. Margaret felt a sense of joy she had not experienced in years, the joy of being useful, of contributing, and of connecting with someone who valued her presence. Henry, too, seemed lighter, more at ease, and more willing to share not only his work but also his thoughts, memories, and feelings. Their time together became a delicate dance of shared effort and growing trust, each moment strengthening the bond between them. Over the following weeks, Margaret and Henry's friendship continued to grow. They would spend time at the shelter at the ranch and occasionally enjoying quiet walks in the nearby woods. Their conversations became more personal, touching on subjects that they had previously only hinted at: their losses, their regrets, their dreams, and their hopes for the future. Margaret shared stories of her late husband, Thomas, and the life they had built together. She spoke of her children, the joy they brought her, and the pride she felt in their accomplishments. Henry, in turn, opened up about his own past, the challenges of running a ranch alone, and the quiet loneliness that had accompanied him for years. These exchanges were not rushed or forced. They unfolded naturally, creating a foundation of trust and understanding that neither had experienced in a long time. Margaret also began to notice changes within herself. She felt more confident, more alive, and more open to new experiences. Her interactions with Henry brought a renewed sense of curiosity and excitement into her life. She found herself thinking about him during the day, anticipating their next meeting, and reflecting on the conversations they had shared. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future that included companionship, laughter, and shared experiences. This shift in perspective was both exhilarating and comforting. Margaret realized that while the past had shaped her, it did not define her, and that the present held opportunities for connection, growth, and happiness. Henry, too, began to experience a subtle transformation. He found himself looking forward to Margaret's visits, enjoying not only her company but also the sense of emotional intimacy they shared. He appreciated her kindness, her humor, and the way she listened without judgment. Her presence reminded him of the importance of connection and the value of sharing life with someone who understands and cares. Henry began to take small steps toward opening his heart, recognizing that vulnerability was not a weakness, but a bridge to meaningful companionship. As they spent more time together, he felt a quiet hope that perhaps life had not yet finished offering him moments of joy and connection. One day, Margaret suggested they take a short trip to a nearby town to visit a local farmer's market. Henry agreed, and the two of them set off early in the morning. The market was bustling with activity, vendors selling fresh produce, handmade crafts, and local delicacies. Margaret and Henry wandered among the stalls, sampling treats, admiring artwork, and engaging in friendly conversations with the vendors. The experience was simple, yet it brought them closer together. They laughed at minor mishaps, shared opinions on different products, and enjoyed the pleasure of being in each other's company. Margaret felt a sense of freedom and joy, a reminder that life could still hold surprises and moments of delight, even at 60. During the trip, they found a quiet spot by a small fountain and sat down to rest. Margaret observed Henry, noting the lines on his face, the way his eyes softened when he smiled, and the quiet strength that seemed to radiate from him. She realized that she felt a sense of comfort and safety in his presence, a feeling that went beyond friendship. Henry, noticing her thoughtful expression, reached out and gently touched her hand. The gesture was simple, yet it carried a depth of meaning. Margaret felt her heart respond, a quiet acknowledgement of the bond they had formed. Neither spoke immediately, but the silence was filled with understanding and unspoken connection. In that moment, Margaret recognized that her life was beginning to change in ways she had not anticipated, and she felt a sense of hope and anticipation for what the future might hold. Back at the ranch, Margaret and Henry continued to share experiences that deepened their bond. They worked together on small projects, shared meals, and spent quiet evenings talking about their memories and dreams. Margaret discovered that Henry had a love for storytelling, and she enjoyed listening to his tales of life on the ranch, the animals he had cared for, and the challenges he had overcome. In turn, Henry enjoyed hearing Margaret's stories of her family, her garden, and the simple joys of her life. Their interactions were filled with warmth, laughter, and mutual respect. Margaret began to feel that she had found someone who not only understood her past, but also embraced the possibility of a shared future. Despite their growing connection, Margaret remained mindful of the importance of patience and careful steps. She understood that meaningful relationships could not be rushed, and that both she and Henry needed time to navigate their emotions and experiences. She reflected on her own past, recognizing the mistakes she had made, the lessons she had learned, and the growth she had achieved. Margaret realized that her journey was not only about finding companionship, but also about continuing to evolve as a person, embracing new experiences, understanding her desires, and cultivating a life that reflected her values and aspirations. This awareness allowed her to approach her relationship with Henry thoughtfully and with intention, creating a foundation for a deeper and more enduring connection. Henry, too, approached their growing bond with care and reflection. He recognized the significance of the connection he shared with Margaret and the importance of nurturing it with honesty, respect, and understanding. He considered the years he had spent in solitude, the lessons he had learned, and the desire he felt to share his life with someone who could appreciate and support him. As he observed Margaret's patience, kindness, and resilience, he felt inspired to open his heart more fully, embracing the possibility of love and companionship once again. Their mutual willingness to approach the relationship thoughtfully created a sense of balance, trust, and emotional security that neither had experienced in years. By the end of Part 3, Margaret and Henry had established a meaningful connection that was rooted in shared experiences, mutual understanding, and genuine care. They had begun to explore the possibilities of companionship, not as a fleeting or superficial relationship, but as a partnership built on trust, respect, and shared values. Margaret felt a renewed sense of hope and excitement about the future, recognizing that life still held opportunities for joy, connection, and personal growth. Henry, too, experienced a quiet optimism, understanding that meaningful relationships could emerge even after years of loss and solitude. Together, they embarked on a journey of healing, companionship, and the gradual discovery of a love that was both tender and enduring. Margaret and Henry's friendship had grown into something tender, steady, and quietly comforting. Yet with every step forward, both of them carried a careful awareness of the past and the fragile nature of opening one's heart after years of loss. Margaret thought often about her late husband, Thomas, the life they had shared, and the deep love they had built together. She knew that memories like these could make new relationships feel complicated, as if the heart had limited space for joy after heartbreak. But Henry, too, had walked a path of sorrow, and in seeing his own gentle vulnerability, Margaret realized that they could create a connection without overshadowing the past, one that respected what they had lost while embracing the possibility of something new. One late afternoon, Margaret visited Henry at the ranch to help him prepare for the upcoming winter. The air was crisp, and the golden light of the sun cast a warm glow over the fields. They worked side by side, repairing fences, stacking hay, and feeding the animals. The work was physical, demanding, yet it brought them closer together in ways that words alone could not. Margaret noticed the care and patience Henry took with each task, the way he quietly corrected mistakes without frustration, and the way he encouraged her efforts with a gentle smile. She realized that this shared labor was not just about maintaining the ranch. It was about building trust, learning from one another, and deepening their bond through action as well as conversation. As they paused for a short break, Margaret noticed that Henry seemed quieter than usual. She gently asked if everything was all right, and after a moment of hesitation, he began to share some of his fears and frustrations. He spoke of the loneliness he had felt after losing his wife, the challenges of managing the ranch on his own, and the moments when he questioned whether happiness was still possible for him. Margaret listened attentively, offering a sympathetic ear and a comforting presence. She shared her own experiences with loss, speaking of the years after Thomas's passing, the moments of isolation, and the difficulty of imagining life beyond grief. By the time their conversation ended, both felt a sense of relief, a mutual understanding that allowed them to lower their defenses and acknowledge the vulnerability they had been carrying. The following weeks were filled with small moments that quietly strengthened their connection. Margaret and Henry would cook simple meals together, share stories over cups of coffee, and spend evenings watching the sun set over the rolling fields of the ranch. They discovered shared interests and hobbies, from reading books aloud to each other to taking short walks through nearby trails. Each experience built layers of trust, companionship, and intimacy. Margaret found herself laughing more freely than she had in years, and Henry noticed a warmth in his heart that he had not felt since before his wife's passing. Their relationship was not marked by grand gestures or dramatic declarations. Instead, it was defined by quiet attentiveness, mutual respect, and the comfort of knowing that they could rely on each other. Despite the growing closeness, both Margaret and Henry faced moments of doubt and insecurity. Margaret worried that she might be moving too quickly, that the bond she felt could be fragile, or that societal expectations about age and relationships might complicate their connection. Henry, meanwhile, struggled with opening his heart fully, fearing the pain of potential loss or the vulnerability that came with emotional closeness. These concerns were natural, yet both recognized the importance of addressing them honestly. On a quiet evening, while sitting on the porch overlooking the fields, Margaret gently expressed her feelings. She spoke about her fears, her hope, and her desire to nurture their relationship thoughtfully. Henry responded with equal honesty, acknowledging his own reservations and his willingness to take things one step at a time. This openness created a foundation of trust that allowed them to navigate their emotions with care and understanding. One day, Margaret invited Henry to join her for a visit to her family's home. Her children were delighted to meet him, and they welcomed him warmly, appreciating the gentle respect he showed their mother. Margaret watched with quiet joy as Henry interacted with her family, sharing stories, listening attentively, and even helping her grandchildren with small tasks in the garden. Observing him in this setting, she felt a growing sense of confidence that he was someone who could truly be a partner, not only in her life, but in the lives of those she loved. Henry, too, felt a sense of belonging and acceptance, realizing that he was not only connecting with Margaret, but also becoming part of a larger circle of family and community. As the seasons began to change, Margaret and Henry shared moments that deepened their emotional connection. One crisp autumn morning, they decided to take a walk through the nearby forest, enjoying the vibrant colors of the changing leaves. The air was filled with the scent of earth and foliage, and the sound of birdsong created a peaceful backdrop. They walked side by side in companionable silence, occasionally sharing observations or memories. Margaret reflected on how far she had come, from a life marked by quiet solitude and repeated rejections to one filled with connection, understanding, and quiet hope. She realized that her journey was not only about finding love, but also about rediscovering herself, embracing her strengths, and allowing herself to experience joy once again. During their walk, Henry spoke about his hopes for the future, his desire to find companionship, and the importance of living life fully despite past hardships. Margaret listened intently, feeling a deep sense of connection and mutual understanding. They discussed their dreams, small and large, and began to imagine a shared life that balanced independence with partnership, solitude with togetherness, and the wisdom of experience with the excitement of new possibilities. Margaret felt a sense of exhilaration, realizing that love and companionship could exist alongside the richness of their individual lives. Henry, too, felt a renewed sense of hope, understanding that meaningful relationships could emerge even after years of grief and solitude. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Henry invited Margaret to sit with him by the fire in the ranch's small living room. They shared a simple meal, and afterward, Henry began to tell stories from his youth, tales of working on the ranch, adventures with friends, and moments of personal triumph and challenge. Margaret listened, captivated by the vivid imagery and the humor woven into each story. She shared her own stories in return, recounting experiences from her childhood, her life with Thomas, and the lessons she had learned over the years. The exchange was more than storytelling. It was an intimate sharing of lives, memories, and the essence of who they were as individuals. In these moments, Margaret and Henry found a sense of closeness that transcended age, loss, or fear. Their relationship continued to grow through small, meaningful gestures. Margaret noticed the way Henry would remember the little things she mentioned: a favorite tea, a preferred spot in the garden, or a story she had shared weeks ago. Similarly, Henry appreciated Margaret's attentiveness, the thoughtful questions she asked, and the genuine care she showed for both him and the ranch. These gestures, simple as they were, created a sense of stability, trust, and emotional intimacy. Margaret began to recognize that the foundation of a strong relationship was built on these consistent, caring actions rather than dramatic displays of affection. She felt reassured that their connection was rooted in authenticity and mutual respect. Despite the growing closeness, moments of reflection sometimes brought waves of vulnerability. Margaret would occasionally think about the past, the years of loneliness, the disappointments in dating, and the absence of her husband. These thoughts were natural, and they reminded her that moving forward did not mean forgetting what had been. Instead, she began to see her experiences as part of the richness of her life, a life that had prepared her to appreciate connection, resilience, and the beauty of new beginnings. Henry, too, reflected on his own past, recognizing that the challenges he had faced had shaped him into someone capable of compassion, patience, and genuine love. Together, they learned to embrace the past while opening themselves to the possibilities of the future. One afternoon, Margaret and Henry worked together on a small project to improve the ranch's vegetable garden. As they planted seeds and tended to the soil, they spoke about their hopes for the coming year, their dreams for shared experiences, and their vision of a life enriched by companionship and understanding. Margaret realized that these simple, collaborative moments were deeply meaningful. They provided opportunities for teamwork, mutual encouragement, and shared purpose. Henry, too, felt a sense of fulfillment and connection, recognizing that these shared experiences created a strong emotional bond that could withstand the challenges life might bring. By the end of Part 4, Margaret and Henry had built a relationship that was steady, nurturing, and filled with mutual respect. They had faced moments of doubt and vulnerability, shared stories of loss and hope, and discovered the joy of companionship in the small, everyday moments of life. Margaret felt a renewed sense of confidence, understanding that love was not about age, past failures, or societal expectations. It was about connection, understanding, and shared values. Henry, too, embraced the possibilities of the future, recognizing that meaningful relationships could emerge at any stage of life. Together, they had created a foundation for a partnership that was tender, enduring, and filled with the quiet joy of mutual understanding. Margaret and Henry had spent many months growing closer, learning to trust one another, and discovering that life after loss could still hold joy, companionship, and love. Their bond had deepened slowly, built on shared experiences, gentle understanding, and a quiet affection that neither had expected. Margaret often reflected on the journey she had taken, from years of loneliness, repeated rejections, and the routine of solitary life, to the discovery that connection could still exist at 60, even after so much heartbreak. Henry, too, had come to appreciate that his life, which had felt lonely and burdened, could now be enriched by shared moments of laughter, care, and support. Together, they were creating a new chapter, one that honored their pasts while embracing the possibilities of the present and future. One sunny morning, Margaret arrived at the ranch with a basket of freshly baked bread and homemade jam. Henry greeted her with a smile, his eyes lighting up as he noticed the thoughtful gesture. Small acts like these had become common between them, gestures of care that communicated affection without the need for words. They shared breakfast on the porch, overlooking the fields where the animals grazed peacefully. The warmth of the sun and the gentle rhythm of life on the ranch created a serene backdrop for their conversations. Margaret noticed how natural it felt to sit with Henry, to share stories, and to simply enjoy the presence of someone who understood her heart. It was in these quiet, ordinary moments that the depth of their bond truly revealed itself. As the day progressed, they decided to spend time organizing the barn. They worked together, lifting hay bales, cleaning stalls, and repairing equipment. The labor was demanding, yet it brought them closer in ways that words could not. Margaret admired Henry's strength and dedication, while he appreciated her willingness to learn, her patience, and her thoughtful approach to every task. Between the work, they laughed at minor mishaps and shared memories of past experiences, each story weaving them closer together. Margaret realized that love did not always require grand declarations or dramatic gestures. It could thrive quietly in shared effort, mutual respect, and the comfort of knowing someone was by your side through life's practical and simple moments. Later that afternoon, Henry suggested they take a walk along a nearby trail. The forest was alive with the colors of early autumn, leaves rustling underfoot, and the scent of pine filling the air. Margaret felt a sense of peace and freedom she had not known for years. As they walked, they spoke about their dreams for the future, the small joys they hoped to continue sharing, and the simple pleasures of life they had sometimes overlooked. Margaret shared her wish to travel to places she had always dreamed of visiting, while Henry spoke of his desire to spend quiet evenings with good books, tending the ranch, and enjoying the companionship of someone who truly understood him. They realized that their dreams were not about extravagance or spectacle. They were about creating a life filled with warmth, understanding, and shared experiences. During their walk, they stumbled upon a small clearing where the sunlight broke through the trees in golden beams. They paused, taking in the beauty of the moment. Henry reached for Margaret's hand, a gentle gesture that conveyed a depth of feeling words could not capture. Margaret felt her heart respond, a quiet acknowledgement of the love and companionship that had grown between them. In that serene moment, surrounded by nature's beauty, they shared a sense of connection that felt both tender and enduring. It was a moment that marked a turning point in their relationship, a realization that their bond was not just friendship, but something deeper, capable of providing comfort, joy, and mutual support for the years ahead. As the seasons changed, Margaret and Henry continued to build their life together. They shared meals, worked side by side on the ranch, and spent evenings talking about memories, hopes, and dreams. They learned each other's routines, habits, and preferences, creating a rhythm of life that was both comfortable and fulfilling. Margaret introduced Henry to her friends and family, who welcomed him warmly and admired the kindness and respect he showed her. Henry, in turn, shared the ranch life with Margaret, teaching her the practical skills of ranching, sharing stories of his experiences, and creating an environment where Margaret felt both needed and appreciated. Their lives became intertwined in a way that balanced independence with companionship, solitude with togetherness, and the wisdom of their experiences with the excitement of shared discovery. One particularly chilly evening, Margaret and Henry sat by the fireplace in the ranch's small living room. The fire crackled softly, casting a warm glow over the space. Margaret sipped her tea as Henry recounted stories of his youth, the challenges he had faced managing the ranch, and the lessons he had learned about resilience, patience, and compassion. Margaret listened intently, occasionally sharing her own experiences, her voice filled with warmth and understanding. The room was filled with a comforting silence between stories, moments where words were unnecessary, and their presence alone conveyed a depth of connection that had grown over time. Margaret felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought her here, for the love and companionship she had found, and for the realization that it was never too late to embrace happiness. As winter approached, Margaret and Henry spent more time indoors, engaging in quiet activities that deepened their emotional intimacy. They cooked meals together, read books aloud, and shared puzzles and games. These shared experiences were small yet meaningful, providing opportunities to connect, collaborate, and enjoy the simple pleasures of life. Margaret found herself laughing more freely than she had in years, and Henry felt a sense of fulfillment and contentment that he had not experienced since before his wife's passing. Their relationship thrived in the quiet, ordinary moments, demonstrating that love could be nurtured in everyday life as much as in extraordinary occasions. Margaret also noticed how her confidence and sense of self-worth had grown. She no longer measured her value by the judgments of others or by societal expectations about age and appearance. Instead, she focused on her strengths, her kindness, and her ability to contribute to the lives of others. Henry appreciated this about her, admiring her resilience, her warmth, and her authenticity. Their mutual respect and admiration became a cornerstone of their relationship, creating a foundation that was both strong and flexible, able to withstand challenges and nurture growth. Margaret realized that love was not about perfection or idealized notions. It was about acceptance, understanding, and the willingness to walk beside someone through life's ups and downs. One sunny afternoon, they decided to host a small gathering at the ranch, inviting close friends and family to share in a meal and enjoy the company of loved ones. The event was filled with laughter, conversation, and the simple joy of being together. Margaret observed the interactions between Henry and her family, noting how easily he connected with her children and grandchildren. She felt a deep sense of happiness and reassurance, recognizing that Henry was not only a companion for her, but also someone who could enrich the lives of those she loved. Henry, in turn, felt a sense of pride and contentment, realizing that he was not only welcomed into Margaret's life, but embraced by her family and community. As spring arrived, bringing new life and growth to the ranch, Margaret and Henry began to make plans for the future. They discussed shared goals, such as improving the ranch, traveling to nearby towns, and continuing to volunteer in the community. They spoke about dreams that were both practical and imaginative, finding joy in the balance between reality and possibility. Margaret felt a renewed sense of purpose, understanding that life was not only about personal fulfillment, but also about contributing to the well-being of others and sharing meaningful experiences. Henry shared this perspective, and together they cultivated a life that was rich, rewarding, and deeply connected. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant mountains, Henry and Margaret sat together on the porch, holding hands and enjoying the serene beauty of the landscape. Margaret reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from years of loneliness, repeated rejections, and the quiet ache of solitude, to a life filled with companionship, love, and hope. She realized that while the path had been challenging, every step had prepared her for this moment. Henry, too, reflected on his journey, recognizing that the love and partnership they shared was not a fleeting occurrence but a meaningful connection that would endure. They sat in comfortable silence, feeling the warmth of the moment, the presence of one another, and the quiet assurance that they had found something rare and valuable. Margaret and Henry also faced moments of challenge, as any relationship does. They navigated differences in opinions, moments of frustration, and the occasional fear of vulnerability. Yet these challenges only strengthened their bond, teaching them patience, empathy, and the importance of communication. They learned to approach disagreements with understanding, to listen without judgment, and to value the perspective of the other. These experiences deepened their connection, creating a relationship that was resilient, adaptable, and rooted in mutual respect. Margaret felt a sense of security and trust that she had not known in years, and Henry found comfort in the knowledge that their bond could endure life's difficulties. By the end of Part 5, Margaret and Henry had built a life together that was tender, supportive, and filled with joy. They had navigated the complexities of past loss, embraced the possibilities of companionship, and cultivated a relationship that honored their experiences while celebrating the present. Margaret felt a profound sense of fulfillment, recognizing that love could arrive at any stage of life, even after years of solitude. Henry shared this sentiment, understanding that meaningful connection was not limited by age, but was shaped by shared experiences, empathy, and the willingness to embrace life together. Their story was a testament to resilience, hope, and the enduring power of love. In the quiet of the evening, as stars began to twinkle in the sky, Margaret and Henry sat together on the porch, hands intertwined, hearts full, and minds at peace. They knew that life would continue to present challenges, joys, and surprises, but they were ready to face them together. The ranch, the animals, their friends and family, and the simple pleasures of daily life were all part of a tapestry that they would continue to weave together. Margaret realized that her journey had taught her that love was not about perfection or timing. It was about presence, understanding, and shared growth. Henry felt the same, grateful for the chance to build a life enriched by companionship, trust, and quiet happiness. As the night deepened, and the gentle sounds of nature surrounded them, Margaret and Henry reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought them together. They had discovered that love could bloom later in life, that connection could heal wounds, and that companionship could provide both joy and strength. Together, they had created a life that was meaningful, fulfilling, and filled with hope for the future. In each other, they had found not only a partner but a friend, a confidant, and a source of enduring comfort. Their story was a celebration of resilience, the human capacity for love, and the beauty of discovering happiness when it was least expected.